originally used, which includes the VVPAT and the software, or a manual count. Now the statute and the directives are clear. The statute and directives all go in the same direction, and all specifically and explicitly say that you have to count the paper. One way or the other, you will have to decide this question. Trung Nguyen has reason to question what happened here. This is the first instance where the registrar has actually changed the result of the election for county office by disallowing ballots that were recounted selectively. This court is being asked to reverse this determination. The determination this court makes will establish a precedent that the citizens of Orange County and the state will have to live with for many years. A ruling that voids all the procedural safeguards, that voids Section 362, that voids Election Code Section 355, that voids Election Code Section 19253, and simply says, we're going to ignore all these, and essentially the defense position is all good. Whoever's doing the recount, they can just pick any method they want that most advantages them. This will guarantee electronic disenfranchisement in the future and chaos. It will change the playbook for how these things are done. A ruling allowing the system to be gained by switching recount methods for tactical reasons is a slippery slope that we would urge the court not to send this county and the state down. It's a road to chaos. If allowed, there's no principled way to keep the counting methods from descending into allowing the method to switch precinct by precinct, city by city, or ballot by ballot. Trung Nguyen won this election, and the recount that overturned his win was never legally completed. Section 15632 requires this court to declare a partial recount that was not legally completed to be null and void. Trung Nguyen has a due process right to have the elections code enforced as it was written, and to be strictly construed in his favor. Every statute and directive that speaks to this issue requires that the VVPAT paper ballots had to be recounted for a full legal recount to occur. There are none to the contrary. Thank you, Your Honor, for your time, your attention, and most all for your patience. We request that you decide this election contest for Trung Nguyen.
Let me ask you just one question. I'm interested in your idea that the original voting method was never used. Now, with regard to absentee ballots, you would think, just starting out looking at it, that the original method was manual. Somebody sat in their kitchen, marked a box, turned it in. Now, it was tabulated, I guess, electronically, scanned, but you would think that the voting method originally used was manual. So when the registrar held those things up one at a time and looked at them manually, that would seem like common sense would say that's the method originally used. You'd say it wasn't because somehow or other the method originally used sweeps in this scheme, which is the mechanical way they looked at it.
Your Honor,
as to the DRE vote, it's just a complete my thought, it would appear to a lay person looking at it that the method originally used was electronic. People went in there, turned the wheel, punched the button, and electronically their vote was recorded. That's why they're called recording electronic voting machines. They're electronic. But you say that was not the original method. Because you have to say, well, you put the whole voting system, the paper becomes part of the system. So we're not counting the paper, the VVPATs. That violates the original method. But I mean, it seems kind of counterintuitive. What they did originally in the absentee ballot was mark it. Those were looked at. What they did with the electronic ballots was push the button. And that's what they did. They simply re-push the button. I understand your argument that probably you're not going to have too much of a change in number if you just put those, what do they call them, MVPs, whatever they call them, back in. You're probably going to get the same number. It seems like you're really stretching to say that the original method was never used. I think a layperson would tend to say the original method was used in both cases.
well, Your Honor, thank you for the opportunity to clarify that. Let's talk about the absentee ballots first. And can you put 362 back up on the board? There's a couple things to keep in mind. The legislature is using these words in very specific ways, and they're different than probably that I, as a layperson, would think they were being used. They talk about a voting system, and it is any mechanical, electromechanical, or electronic system, and its software, or any combination of used to cast or tabulate votes or votes. So what they're talking about here is a system, and they want to do the system used originally. It has to be the system that was used both to cast and tabulate. Now, let's talk about the absentee ballots. How were they cast? Well, everyone knows that they filled out manually, and they were dropped off or dropped in a box or whatever. That's how they were voted. Now, how were they tabulated? Mr. Kelly's uncontradicted testimonies, they weren't counted manually. They were fed through an optical scanner. That's how they were tabulated. So the voting system for the absentee ballots was they were cast by somebody filling it out and delivering it. And they were tabulated, which is they were counted by a machine on election day. So if you wanted to do it by original means, then you're stuck with original means because they give you a choice. And in this case, the original means would have been putting those ballots back through the optical scanner and counting them that way.
So what I mean, just so I understand, what you're saying is that some citizen went in and said, I want those absentee ballots recounted by original means. Although it would seem like he was thinking, I want to look at that because I want to find out if we're identifying marks up there. All he would get was it's rescanned.
That's correct, and that's the only way he could request that. Now, they give him a choice of manual, so if he wants them looked at, he does what happened here, sends a letter, says I want them looked at manually. And if you want them done the other way, then you go say, okay, do it by original means. Now, in a situation where they didn't count them by machine on that night, you couldn't even get the machine counted because the original means then would have been counted by hand. But you have a choice of, you always can do manual, so you can get the ballots looked at. Or if something other than a manual count was done, you can have that replicated. But the evidence is absolutely uncontradicted and clear that here, the way the absentee ballots were tabulated, were counted was by a machine. Now the voter could have come in and did in fact come in here and say, well, I don't want that done, I want it done manually. But if you said a means originally used, then it has to be the means originally used, which was an electromechanical, because it's a scanner, an electromechanical thing that runs them through, reads them and counts them.
And what did Mr. Woodger's letter ask for?
It said that they wanted a manual, they wanted to commence with a manual count of the absentee ballots. That's what Mr. Woodger's letter says. Now, let's talk about the electronic ballots.
But they did do a manual recount.
They did a manual recount of the absentee ballots, that's correct. They did not do it by original means. Now, the second part of your question was, well, wasn't at least the electronic done by original means? And the answer is no, because there's two things that happen with by the voting system used originally. One is casting of the ballots, and the second one is the counting of the ballots. The MVD memory stick is only part of the system.
But then original means